Bali as a brand is huge, right? Even when I go back to my small hometown in the UK, everybody's dream is to go to Bali. Right now, a lot of people are focused on Bingin, but I think much like Canggu in the early days where we relied on Batu Belong, Bingin will be that kind of center of everything in the future.
Welcome to Real Talk. I'm Valleska, your host for everything real estate in the Island of Gods. In this podcast, we'll have real talks with property experts that will give you all the insights you need. So, whether you're a property pro or just curious about the real estate in Bali, you're in for a ride. Hi guys, we're here today on another episode of Real Talk. Today we're interviewing our sales manager, Joe. So with no further ado, I'll let him introduce himself a little bit first.
Hey.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me. Super nervous to be here.
Same.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, like I said before, I think that you should introduce yourself first.
Yes.
Let our audience know who you are.
Yes. Okay. So I'm Joe, sales manager at Propertia. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years, during COVID, after COVID, until this point.
Why did you decide to come to Bali?
So there's a long story behind it. I've been in Asia for about 10 years.
Okay.
I've been in and out of Bali for the same sort of time. I was initially in China with my last job, and I was going through a period where I did contract work, and in between I wanted somewhere to go in Southeast Asia. So I spent a little bit of time in Phuket, a little bit of time in Bali. After a while, realized that Bali was somewhere I could see myself long term. And it took a long time to kind of get what I wanted in Bali, but it was the right decision in the end.
Okay, nice. So how long ago was this?
So I started coming to Bali about 11 years ago.
Okay.
I started making my move towards Bali in 2017. So a little bit like everybody, my first year or so was a bit in and out. I wasn't sure, could I make it work? And then I did manage to come here for a while, left for a little bit again, and so on. I've been permanently back here for just over 3 years, full time.
And what were you doing before Propertia?
So before Propertia, I've always done sales, first off, right? I've always done sales and retail. It's always been, I'd say, luxury sales and retail. Very early in my career, I worked for the BMW group. So I was a dirty car salesman. After that, I spent most of my career working in travel retail. So it was luxury travel retail. I worked for the LVMH group, so Louis Vuitton, Moët Hennessy, and worked alongside them, with them on the accounts that we had in China. So not property.
But you can't really get more luxury than LVMH.
LVMH is the wealthiest luxury brand in the world, right? So I was introduced to luxury brands, high net worth clients, a different way of spending. It was during a time in China where anti-corruption laws weren't really in place, so people were spending very easily. And it got me very comfortable with high ticket items. It also just introduced me to different brands, how they operate. LVMH has now Tiffany, Bulgari, Omega, lots of very high end brands. So it gave me a really good introduction to that level of client, I would say.
And how was the transition into property?
So everything happened around the same time, right? So around the beginning of 2017, I started making my move towards Bali. I think I'd already established it was somewhere that I could see myself living long term, but I wasn't really sure how to make it happen. When I first came down here to explore the idea, I met Peter probably within my first week or so.
Right.
On the island, and Peter had just done something very similar, right? So Peter, our owner, just moved from Denmark. He was looking at creating a life in Bali, and we met in the gym. So we were just chatting, let's go for a coffee. And I think it became very clear quite quickly that we had similar principles on how sales, customer service should be done. But at that point, Propertia was still very much in its inception. He wasn't ready to have an expat in the company. So it took a little while to try and just build that relationship, understand, is it something that I could help them with? Did they need my help? And it took about 2 years until they could actually approach me and see, could it happen?
Right.
And then COVID happened. So that put another 1 year delay on everything. So we actually agreed for me to come out at the end of 2019 to be full-time with the company. I actually came out for a trip to discuss how that would work. And then COVID happened and I had to go back to my country for 7 months before I could get back here permanently.
So you've seen like the change of like Bali and how the island has changed.
Yeah, I mean,
from 11 years ago to now.
Yeah, so honestly, my early days in Bali were not so much Canggu. It was probably more Kuta as a newbie backpacker, just wanting to go and learn how to surf, right?
We all went through that.
2017 was when I was first introduced to Canggu, and Canggu was a very different place at that point, right? So I think it was only Deuce Machina, Crate Cafe that existed in the area at that time. I knew people when I came here that had already been in and out of property as well, but I didn't have a huge understanding of what they were doing. And then when I came in COVID, it was when the most changes happened. It was like everywhere else in Bali was closing down, but Canggu was accelerating at that time. So a lot of changes in that time.
What do you think makes Bali appealing for both local and international?
Locally wise, I mean, I love the Balinese people, right? I think the energy that they have is just incredible. But from an expat point of view, I've been in Asia for a long time. So I've seen a lot of expats that have moved to the area. And a lot of them primarily have been based in Shanghai, Singapore, Hong Kong. When I started to explore more island life 6-7 years ago, for me it was between Thailand and Bali, right? And I spent a lot of time exploring Phuket, which I think is a fantastic place. But what I realized quite quickly there is it's not very diverse. When you go there, it doesn't really matter where you go on the island. It looks very similar. And when I started to explore Bali more, it was wherever you went, you could drive 1 hour north and you would be freezing cold in the forest, right? Yeah. You could go 1 hour south and you could be in best surfing in the world. You could go west, east, whatever way, and you would find something different. And I think that was what was most appealing to me, was the diversity that, you know, no day is the same in Bali, but also you can easily, if you're having a day where you're sick of Canggu traffic, whatever it might be, you can easily just go and drive somewhere for an hour and have a complete different perspective.
Since there's like a lot of tourism in Bali, right?
Yes.
How do you think that shapes the investment scene?
I mean, we saw in COVID how detrimental not having tourists was to the island, right? At that time, they were saying Bali's 70-ish% reliant on tourism. And although Canggu still seemed to thrive, we saw the different areas that struggled, right? But it showed us, if we brought those tourists back, what the potential was of the island. Bali as a brand is huge, right? Even when I go back to my small hometown in the UK, everybody's dream is to go to Bali. You know, I speak to people all of the time, family, friends from school, and, you know, I have to pinch myself a little bit to realize how lucky I am to live here. But for them, it's a dream to come for 2-3 weeks and explore the island.
We take it for granted sometimes.
Definitely. And you know, each morning I'm an early bird, and when I get to the gym that I go to, I kind of look around at sunrise and look at the area and think I'm exceptionally lucky to be able to have this life. There are people around the world that, you know, they would save up for years to do a 2-week trip to come here, which makes us very lucky. But I think because it's such a desirable island, of course, there's always going to be that flow of tourists coming in and out. And in 2023 alone, there's 19,000 people flying in every day, right? Yeah. And there's just that constant flow, and there's so much. A lot of it comes to Canggu, I'm sure. A lot of it goes to Uluwatu, but you have Ubud, Sanur, Nusa Dua, you have all of the north of Bali, West Bali. So I cannot see that tourism will slow down here. And we've seen in the past also that when something has happened in Bali, volcano goes off, whatever it might be, it recovers very quickly, right? You know, maybe there's a few weeks or even a couple of months where things slow down a little. And then as soon as the availability is there to come back to the island, people are flocking to get back here very quick.
All the areas that you mentioned, which one do you think is like the best ones to invest in Bali as of right now?
I mean, it's easy for me to say Canggu because that's where our business has been based for the last 5 years, right? And Canggu used to be one street in the middle of Batu Belong that was where the tourists went, right? Now Canggu's a brand where it goes from Umalas, Barawa, all the way through to Preranan, Tumbat Bayu, Babakan. So Canggu, for different styles of investment, can work for different people, right? That's the easy answer. I think, of course, the answer that a lot of people are talking about now is Uluwatu. Uluwatu as an area is 6 to 7 times bigger than what we're talking about in Canggu. So potential down there is huge. Right now, a lot of people are focused on Bingin. But I think much like Canggu in the early days where we relied on Batu Belong, Bingin will be that kind of center of everything in the future, and everything around it will grow. So, it's very easy to make an investment in Canggu now that will pay off very quickly. But I also think now is also the right time to be looking at Uluwatu as an area.
We sell a lot of Offplan properties
Yes.
and Canggu, both
Yeah.
in Canggu and Uluwatu. I know that a lot of people are very scared of making that step, but it's super easy. It's like, I don't think that our customers realize how easy it is to buy Offplan properties. So maybe you can walk through
for sure.
the process like a little bit and just...
So I think Offplan has become a necessity in the last 2 years, right? Because when the borders opened, COVID was over, everybody came into Bali, the finished properties sold very quickly. So everything has become Offplan over the last 18 months. What it's meant is that people have a lot of choice. Our customers can be a little bit more picky than maybe they could in the past. And they can also be a bit more involved with it as well, right? We've kind of had to tailor our business to be specialists in Offplan, I would say, hence the studio that we're sitting in and those sort of things. But a large percentage of the sales we do are Offplan, so we're very experienced now in how it works. Our clients should not be scared, first of all. Our sales team are incredibly proficient at what they do and very knowledgeable in how it works. The developers that we also work with, we take a lot of pride in who we choose to work with, because we understand that if it doesn't go so well, it's probably our credibility that's on the line. So we are definitely not an agency that will just list any product or project for the sake of having it, right? We like to meet all developers and thoroughly go through what they're actually building, what they've built in the past, what the plan is. And then we're here to hold the buyer's hand throughout that process, right? So it does get a little bit more complicated because there are more than one contract involved in this. There's a lot of trust involved with us, with the developer. There's a lot of milestones and obligations that developers need to stick to. But contractually, we're very used to putting that together to protect the client. And most important, what the client should understand here is we're there for the whole process, right? It's not a case of we close at the notary and then we leave them alone for the next 12 to 18 months. Our team is there to do regular updates, to help them, because most clients are overseas, help them see what's actually going on site before they're making their additional payment. So we're there to protect them ultimately. And I think we make the process quite straightforward now.
What would you say is the biggest perk of buying Offplan?
I think there's a few. I mean, if we look at Uluwatu right now, if you have a finished villa, you're going to pay a premium to get that finished villa. Yeah. So Offplan naturally is a little bit less expensive, right? I think secondly, a lot of people come here with the grand idea if they want to build their own villa, and we have our own thoughts on that, right? And it's not something we would tell anybody to jump into without doing a proper due diligence of their own. But when you're buying an off-plan villa, it gives you that chance to be quite creative and be involved with it, but without necessarily being the person that has to check the site 3 times a day, right? So for me, it's something that maybe you can take a sense of pride in, that you have been part of it, but
because it can be tweaked, right? Like an off-plan property,
basically
it's
is what
not
I'm saying.
like,
An off-plan project structurally can be more difficult to make changes, right? But cosmetically, it's very achievable to get it how you would want it. And this is one of the questions we ask a lot of the developers when we choose to work with them is how able are you to make changes that our clients will want? And they will always say, yes, they are.
To sunk or not to sunk the living room, yeah?
Yeah, if you want a sunken living area, then you need to decide that very early, right? But in general, when it comes to tiles, paint colors, etc., then of course they can be involved in this and feel like they're a part of the development.
In general, like what makes a property successful for investment? Like what are the main key points that you've seen with properties?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about three things, right? We talk about location. Location is very important because, as I said before, Canggu used to be the middle of Canggu. Now Canggu is an area that covers about a radius of 5 kilometers, right? Mm-hmm. So area is very important. And it doesn't mean for me that if you're in the outskirts of Canggu, it's not going to be a good investment, but it's a different type of investment, right? Maybe it's something that you're more reliant on with monthly rental or yearly rental. Style is very important. Style is something we talk about a lot at the moment. Bali, Canggu in particular, seems to be taken over by the Mediterranean style, which is quite a broad term. But yeah, I think style is hugely important. We've seen the styles adapt kind of through the older Seminyak villas and then the initiation of Canggu, where the styles have adapted. I think what's important on the style is that the villas can also be used for multiple purposes, right? It used to be perhaps in Seminyak that you had this beautiful Balinese villa, open living, all of that. We saw during COVID when families were flocking to come here that they didn't want the open living villas, right? They wanted villas that were enclosed, villas where all of the bedrooms were well connected because of their children. So rainy season's about to come, right? You don't want open living. You don't want all the bugs coming in. Of course, as a family, you don't want to walk across the garden to get to your children's bedrooms. Yeah. So I think style and layout is hugely important. And then, of course, based on those two factors, you should pay the right price. Location's very important, right? And I've seen people who have chosen amazing villas for returns that are not necessarily in the middle of Canggu. It could be up in Babakan, it could be in Tumbat Bayo, but they get those returns by doing a monthly rental, a yearly rental, right? So I think once you've chosen the location, you have the right style, of course, we're there to guide and make sure that the price is a representation of the market and also of the returns that you should expect.
Yeah, because we've seen like an inflation of prices. Like the last year was crazy.
Yeah. And that was all driven from rental prices, right? Yes. Because again, when the borders opened, there was a lack of inventory. People were willing to pay anything just to get a villa that was enclosed in a good location. And then suddenly it had a knock-on effect to the developers who were saying, okay, now my villa can be a higher price as well. We've also seen land prices go up a lot in the area. So of course that's going to affect the sales price, and construction costs of course more. I wouldn't say we're trying to control the prices, but we're definitely trying to regulate and make sure that our buyers are protected when they're buying something, because they have an expectation for their returns. And if it's too expensive, they're not going to get the returns they're happy with.
All right. So from now, like, you know, all the way from before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, to now, like, how do you see the real estate scene evolving?
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, because it's been like everyone started to build, right? Yeah. So a lot of people like question the viability of, you know, everyone having a good return of investment, and like not all villas can be filled. That's like one of the main questions that we get.
I think again, it comes back to what you want to do with the villa. Definitely. If you want to rent it out daily, then there is a criteria you're going to need to fulfill for that. And that primarily is going to be style and location, right? I always tell my clients that buy the daily rental villas, the most Instagrammable villas are the ones that will win, right? If your target market is to just rent it out for a 6-month period on a monthly basis whilst you're not living in Bali, then it can be a villa that's somewhere else, right? But style will have a big impact over the next couple of years. I think that there's enough business and enough clients flying into Bali on a daily basis to fill the villas. But I also think the villas that will suffer through this are perhaps the older style villas, the ones that haven't been able to update their styles or keep up with the trends. That's just the way it is in the property market, right? I think it's the same if you go to Santorini, Ibiza, wherever you go, people are going to be booking the newer, nicer villas faster than the older ones, right? But we're there to make sure that people are stepping into the right investment, right? And we will be very upfront if we think this is not a villa that you're going to get a 90% occupancy on, right? Because it's in Tumbat Bayo or wherever. It doesn't mean it's a bad investment, but we're also at a stage where Canggu, that there cannot be that much more development. We're kind of at its capacity. So yes, there's a lot of development now, which is basically the tail end of COVID and the people that came just after the borders opened. Give it another year to 18 months. I think that development will slow down a lot in Canggu because space has run out, basically. But then we see Uluwatu as that next area.
Even on the outskirts of Canggu, there's like areas that are developing.
Yeah, definitely. So I think traditionally in Bali, it went from Kuta, Legian, Seminyak, Canggu, Preranan, now Sese, Chamagi, Nyanyi, Kadungu. So all of those, naturally, those areas will continue to grow. I think the only thing that is perhaps slowing down the growth of those areas, honestly, is Uluwatu.
Right.
Because I spoke to clients years ago about Uluwatu, and I always felt that if it had the ability to grow as an area, it would have, but there were limitations with zoning, with water, with electricity, things like that. Now all of that is not such an issue. The zoning changed, there's running water going up to the Bukit, there's power, things like that. So now that area is going to grow, and because of the growth of that area is going to slow down the potential of probably Chamagi, Nyanyi and Kadungu, but it's not going to stop it. It's still going to happen, I think, because there are going to be people that always want to be 2 or 3 minutes to the beach, that maybe don't want to walk down the cliff to get to a beach.
Yeah.
So naturally, those areas are going to continue to grow.
And what do you think is the biggest misconception about Bali?
With Bali?
Yeah.
I am very upfront with clients when they come here, and I say, because I've come to Bali and I've left, and I've come and I've left, and then I came back and stayed, that Bali is a place you have to take the rough with the smooth. I love it as an 100%. Area, right? But you have to understand that traffic can be a nightmare. Sometimes you have to understand that there are certain things that are not always going to go your way as an expat.
Your patience will be tested.
And you have, I remember the first time I came and I left. And I left after a few months thinking, okay, now I need to go and decide, is this the place I want to be? Because I was already at that point, I was sick of traffic and I was sick of certain things. And after a few months, I was like, but actually I really love it. It's just a case of I need to adapt to that way, not that way needs to adapt to me, right? Yeah. And I realized, okay, I need to take the rough with the smooth. I need to understand that there's a different way of doing things there. But I also need to immerse myself into it a little bit more and maybe try and learn some of the language or whatever it might be, so that I'm more adapting to that side of it. A little bit, yeah, but I'm not going to. So I think people come here and they can get it takes time, right? If you're coming here for 3 months expecting everything to be perfect and the way that you think it's going to be, it takes a bit of time. You need to understand how the island works. You need to understand, it's great when you come here and somebody does your laundry for you all the time, but maybe that's not feasible all the time, right? So it's working out what works for you.
That's like one of the biggest perks for me.
See, I've been here a long time and I do my own laundry, right?
Wow.
Because if I go back to my country though, there's no chance that somebody's doing the laundry, or not cheap anyway. So it's working out what works and what doesn't. And like I said, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes there's a down day, but I think we did a wall a while ago that said a bad day in Bali is still better than a good day anywhere else, right? And for me, actually what that means is far more good days to outweigh the bad days. Of course you have bad days here, but in general, it's a very good quality of life in general. The island is amazing. It's so diverse. You can do whatever you want in terms of going to different areas, seeing different things. And again, it's pinching yourself a little bit to say, wow, this is a dream destination for millions of people around the world, and we get to embrace it every day.
But still, Bali is not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. And in the same respect that, Phuket was not for me when I went there, right? And I made the decision that Bali was for me. And, there are still times where I like to go to cities. I like to embrace a different life for a weekend, right? I still like to go back to the UK.
Driving on highways.
Yeah, or just, queuing for things is sometimes quite nice. I like to go back to the UK to actually get a bit of cold weather for 2 weeks, right? And just remember what that's like, so that I know I never want it again. Yeah. But in general, it's not for everybody, but it's an incredible place.
What do you think are the 3 biggest mistakes that people make when investing in Bali?
I think timing is a big thing, right? People are quite quick to come here and jump into doing a project. I actually was chatting to somebody the other day who said, I just moved here. I want to give it a shot at this whole property thing, right? And then I started talking a little bit about, okay, you know, PTPMAs, what's your structure and all that. And he had never heard of what I was talking about, right? And I think people just need to take a little bit of time to understand how it works here. I think it's important if you're jumping into property in general to develop or to build, that you have a good understanding of what the market already has. Go and stay in 50 different villas around Bali and figure out what they're like and what they're lacking and all of that, and probably not relying on us enough, right? I mean, we take a lot of pride that we're here for our clients, whether they're investing in a villa, they're buying land to build, whatever it is they're doing, our team is here to support, right? And we're very happy to advise people, because we would rather that we can give some good advice that comes back around to us in the next few years than they jump in blindly and build something that is difficult to sell or build the wrong thing or whatever. So
I mean, it can be like super overwhelming to start a project of buying property, and people usually don't understand the freehold leasehold thing, and because it's so different from most countries. I know that I think New Zealand has the same thing, that you can't own land, but as a foreigner, but
I mean, I think first of all, it's, you know, we look at where else would people invest in, right? It's not just Bali. Would they invest in Thailand, in Mexico, Portugal, wherever it might be? What are the limitations in those countries as well? We know that, of course, if they go to Dubai, they can buy freehold, but they're also going to be paying more than what they would be paying here. You know, I think a lot of people look at it and they get very caught up on the whole leasehold thing, but the reality is it's just an investment, right? If you can make that investment back in 5 years and you can make your invested amount 5 times over in the next 25 years, it still makes sense. Even if in 25 years you didn't have it, the likelihood of that is very slim, right? The chances are if you buy a leasehold property for 25, 30 years, you're still going to have it for 40 years, 50 years, right? But even if it was the worst case scenario, it still makes a lot of sense. But for the type of returns that people expect, of course, there's going to be some pros and some cons with whatever they do. So I think you can look at other countries where you can buy freehold, but your returns are going to be much, much smaller. Maybe that's over forever period, but honestly I have no idea where I'm going to be in 25 years. So for me, 25-year lease is quite a long time, right? But that's what our team is here for. We're here to make people feel at ease with the minefields.
I think we have that mentality. I don't want to say back in the days, but back in the days, our grandparents bought a house thinking to just leave it to their children, who could leave it to their children. Now we don't really have that mentality anymore. But there, you know, it's like, okay, we would rather make the investment for 25 years. And like you said, if worst case scenario, you have to give it back. It's just, it makes sense for 25 years to have that investment.
I think about my family in the UK, my parents or whatever, and they worked for years and years to pay off their mortgage, that when all is said and done, you know, they're probably going to leave it to me or somebody, the cat or whatever. But also in let's say in my country, people were very reliant on paying off their mortgages and building pensions for the future and things like that, which in recent years we found out don't really exist. So it's more important to make the right investments now. And I think the people in Bali and Dubai and that are a lot more transient. They like to go different places, not be tied to one place, but people are a lot more investment savvy these days as well, right? They're not just looking at putting it into stocks and shares and then just leaving it there, right? They're also looking at other avenues.
NFTs.
I think that was crypto a few years ago, which seems nobody talks about anymore. But NFTs or whatever it might be, but property historically is a safe investment, right? No matter, as long as you do it somewhere which is not too risky. And 19,000 people a day coming into Bali, I would say that it's a very safe investment no matter what you have, because amongst those 19,000 people there are going to be different people, different budgets, families, singles, couples, whatever you invest in. If you're in an area that is desirable, it's a safe investment, right? You just need to be guided in the right way with our team.
All right, speaking of guidance, what is the best advice you've received about investing in Bali, having a business in Bali?
I I think it's just to do your research. I'm also somebody that invests in Bali, right? And it's taken me a long time to figure out how I should do that. And I've made mistakes as well. I also am fortunate to have a lot of very good clients that have done a lot of investments over the years. And they also give me guidance sometimes and say, mistakes are okay, but you can easily move on to the next thing and get out of it. So I think there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? It's a case of asking people, and you will find in Bali that if you ask 10 people, you'll probably get 10 answers. But at least you have the information to make an informed decision. And I think that's far better than trying to fly solo and just see what happens.
Okay. And what's the worst advice that you have received?
I don't know if I've had any worse advice. Any advice to me, whether it's good or bad, is good, right? As long as I can learn from it. And it might be that somebody gave me advice 2 years ago that I thought at the time was really good. And looking back, I realized it was not so good. So I don't know if I've had any really bad advice, but where the biggest mistakes happen, I think people that are in a rush to do it. Of course, if they want to invest very quickly, then they should come to us to find the right villa, right, that is ready. But when people rush into wanting to build their own, be a developer, whatever it might be, mistakes will happen 100%, whether it's your company structure, business, your setup, your contractor, your architect, whatever it might be. So I think people are in a rush. And I also believe that Bali is an incredible place to build a house for yourself, because you can be very creative and you can do things here for a fraction of the cost of what it would cost in other countries. But it's not something you should jump into blindly, right? And I've seen people make mistakes choosing the wrong contractors or choosing inexperienced architects or choosing the wrong agent and buying land in the wrong place, right? So I think don't be in too much of a rush to get it done tomorrow.
You manage quite a big team now. So how many?
Good question. So we have six sales, and we have 2 listing and 2 development.
So 10 people must be a little bit stressful. Yeah. What do you do to cope with the stress?
What do I do?
To decompress.
The answer. Our team is amazing, right? So stress. It's always good stress, right? Because if our team is successful, then it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate my time out of work as well, which doesn't happen a lot because I think my phone is nonstop. I'm quite a routine person. I like to get up very early and have my coffee and go to the gym in the morning. That's probably the 1 hour a day where I'm not looking at my phone. So yeah, I love that as well. I appreciate my weekends as well. I love to be able to drive down to Uluwatu on the weekend, or even fly somewhere out of Bali and just decompress a little bit. But I also, maybe I have to say this, I love my job as well, right? So for me, there's a lot of times where I'm working and it doesn't feel like work because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. But I need my 7 a.m. gym for sure. Yeah. That's a necessity. If I don't have my coffee in the morning in the gym, then I cannot come to work at 9 o'clock.
You can DM Joe for his workout routine later.
Yes, come and join me. It's just one of those things. But also, I find a lot of my business happens in the gym, which I do it to step away from the business, but particularly the time I train and the type of people. Bali is a very fitness orientated island, right? Particularly around Canggu, that's full of gyms, health food cafes, and that. So you're already surrounded by a lot of like-minded people, but it's amazing when people come into the gym that I go to and we start chatting how many people have businesses here, have property or investing and all of that. So I also use it as a good way to connect.
Last question. It's a little bit of a selfish question that I'm doing to everybody.
Uh-oh. Yep.
What's your favorite cafe? I like to try new cafes. So I'm asking everybody to build up a database of...
For coffee or food or breakfast or lunch?
Coffee. Coffee breakfast.
Coffee breakfast. There's a cafe I miss that I wish would come back.
Okay.
So Michelle and Armin from Quince, if they would open, I would be very happy. But I think my favorite breakfast, I have 2.
Okay, you can say 2.
So Gutier in Brava, close to our office, is very good. Okay. And I also really like the breakfast at Moe's. I also train with the owner at the gym, so I kind of have to say that. But no, I really like it. The food's amazing and good coffee. So
those 2 are Good.
top two for my breakfast.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything that there is to know about what it takes to manage a sales team in Bali. So thank you so much, Joe.
Very cool.
I know you have your hands full, so thank you for your time. And you guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and there will be a lot more of content like this one. So stay tuned. See you next time.